From Microbe TV, this is Office Hours for Wednesday, December 27th, 2023. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and welcome to your little corner of the internet where you can hear intelligent talk about viruses and tonight about cities. I have a special guest for you tonight. He is from, Parasiteswithoutborders.com in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Dickson Despommier, welcome back.
Thank you, Vincent. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here. How's the weather in Fort Lee? Is it raining?
Well, it must be the same as where you are. You're not too far away from where I am. I don't know if it's raining or not. I haven't actually. No, I don't. Well, there's some spritzing on the window. So, yeah, I think it.
Spritzing.
Some spritz. Right. It's not heavy rain, but it's not absent either. It's precipitation of some sort.
We are going to chat with Dickson about his new book, The New City. Here it is. We'll tell you how to buy it, but before we do that, and of course, if you have virus questions or parasite questions, feel free. Throw them out there, man. We'd love to have them.
That's right.
But I first want to start by thanking our moderators for being here tonight. We have Barb Mack, UK. We have Vanity Nutrition. We have Andrew from New Zealand.
Really?
So Barb Mack is from the UK. Vanity Nutrition is from the area. Who else do we have here? Andrew. I saw Steph from San Francisco. Tom is from Eugene, Oregon tonight. That is and Frank is from the New York area. Thank you all for moderating for us, keeping this a civilized little environment where, things are calm and collected and cool, okay? Now, folks, I want you to tell Dickson where he is, where you are from, not where he's from. We already know where he's from. Let's see here. We already have some people telling us because they know the drill. You know the drill, Dickson, right?
I know the drill. I do.
Okay. Look at this. Here we go. This is the first one I have here. Jan is from Tucson, Arizona, where it was -1°C this morning. Wow.
That's cold.
That's cold. Let's see. Pam is from the mouthing of Virginia. I don't know what that means, but thanks for coming. Hat is from LA, where it's 16 and dark.
16 and dark.
Claire is from the UK.
Cool.
Lise is from Columbus, Ohio. And as I said, Tom is from Eugene, Oregon. Nicola is from Italia. Super happy that Dickson is on a live stream again.
Oh, good.
Dickson and I have been toying with doing a weekly, click-clack thing. What is it called? Click-clack, right?
Click and clack.
Yeah, we can't take that title, but we were toying and just chatting about different things. We have a lot to talk about.
We do.
Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Patty is in Massachusetts. Look at this. See? Yay, a Dickson evening. It is a Dickson evening.
You better save that for the end. I hope it's the truth.
Joseph is from Ontario, Canada.
This is exciting.
Isn't it exciting? Now, I know Will is from Changsha, China.
My goodness.
Know because I've seen Will before. Here is Kip. Maybe you remember Kip from the incubator. We had dinner with him, remember?
I do. Actually, I'm not sure I had dinner with him, but I know you did.
You had a drink at the incubator, though, right? Yeah.
I did.
Thank you. Welcome, Kip from San Francisco. Dean is from Wyoming.
Sure.
And I know that Jessica is from Toledo, Ohio, where you spent some time, right, Dickson?
Yeah, one of my sons was born in Toledo.
Lori's checking in from Pueblo, Colorado. I know Questella is from Ohio also.
Okay.
Oh, Jessica's in Florida. Sorry, I thought you were in Toledo, Ohio. Are you vacationing there? I guess so. Kang is from Chicago. He has a question for you, but we'll wait. Frank is from Santa Barbara.
Nice. Good place.
Isn't this a wonderful
It's eclectic.
smorgasbord?
Yeah, no, it is. It's an amazing new world of you can be anywhere you want. Basically, it's almost like quantum mechanics. The same particle could be in two different places at once. When you
Yeah,
have a podcast like this, you can be everywhere at once.
of course. I love it. I just love the ability to do this.
I don't blame you at all. I think that when you find your passion and you have, your whole demeanor changes, and you don't walk to work, you run to work, and it's not
I
work.
hop,
It's
skip, and jump.
hop, skip, and jump. That's
E. Joe
exactly right.
Keller's from Matthews, North Carolina. And here are two of our moderators, Frank, who's from the New York area, and Steph from San Francisco. Dagfinn Rosnes is from Oslo. It's
I landed
pretty,
in Oslo once, but I never stepped out of the airplane.
it's, let's see. Hold on. Who's next here? Avon Lake.
Don't know where that is.
Where's Avon Lake?
What's it near?
Bring Amy back out of the dungeon. Maybe Amy is here tonight looking. She's not in the dungeon.
She never was in the dungeon.
John is from Minneapolis, 0 degrees Celsius.
Good city. Very good city.
Abdulaziz from Saudi Arabia.
Aha.
Wow. This could be the farthest person away, right?
Cool.
Who knows? Ariozone is from Asheville, North Carolina. I've been there. Roberta is from Niskayuna, New York. Do you know where that is, Dickson?
I have no idea.
You're a fisherman. You ought to know this stuff,
Well,
right?
never been to Michigan. I've been to a lot of places.
Reagan is from New City, New York.
Been there.
And
just
MN is from DC. Curly Dog is from Montreal, Canada.
How many people are you going to list here? We got a lot of people out there.
Well, we have 140 people.
Oh, my goodness.
They want to see you, Dickson. Elizabeth from West
Well, I'd like
Virginia.
to see them, too.
Powell is from New York City. Frank is from just north of New York City. Vanity's from Rumson and lives on Long Island. Long Island.
True.
Swansea, UK. Oh, boy, do I have a Swansea story.
Really?
Gosh, I went to a meeting in Swansea. We have plenty of time. I went to a meeting in Swansea in December, and they had the meeting there. It was over holiday break, so the university is out. So we stayed in the dorms and had the meeting at the university. Oh, my God, the dorms were freezing.
Which university?
I don't know, Swansea University. And the sheets on the bed had holes in them, so my toes get stuck in them all the time.
Oh, my God.
And the bathroom was down the hall in a closet, and it was freezing.
Sounds like a Gordon conference.
Thomas is from Akron, Ohio.
Yeah, they make a lot of
Jill is from Wilmington, Delaware.
Very nice.
Okay, Jessica's in Florida for the holidays. Stay away from the Surgeon General and the governor.
Exactly.
Bus driving one is from Michigan. And look, Noir wants a weekly chat between you and me. It's like no more than half an hour live, right, Dickson?
Let's do it. Come on, let's do it.
Richard is from Portland, Oregon. Here's Will from China, where it's 5 degrees. Bernard is in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Huh?
Yeah.
Rafael is from Brazil. Wow.
Big place.
Rafael is from Brazil. Visto Tutti is in Sydney. See, Vincent, be nice to Dickson. Be nice to Dickson.
Oh, he's always nice to me. It doesn't work that way,
hey, another person from Brazil. Dickson is a true naturalist.
Oh, that's
what does that mean? What is a naturalist, Dickson?
I guess it means that I have a deep appreciation for life on Earth. and I respect it. I do respect it. Even though I
Jill says,
fish, I put them all back.
a weekly cafe clutch with Dickson and Vince would be awesome. I just don't know when to do it. That's the problem, because no matter when you do it, you're going to exclude someone, right? So
do it at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's when I have my coffee.
see, Nicola's in favor of a weekly Dickson and Vincent random chat. Okay.
Random. Yeah.
Kilmarnock, Virginia. Interesting.
No idea.
Avon Lake, Ohio. Eastern Oregon. Interesting. Elgin, Illinois, or Elgin, Illinois.
No marbles are there.
Bus driving is in Michigan. 2 devices, so 2 thumbs up. Thank you. Everyone, give a thumbs up. 147 of you. 70 likes. Please, the rest of you like. Janet is from Surrey, British Columbia.
It's a good place. Surrey. I've been to Surrey. That's an interesting place. We'll talk about that. There's cities.
Avon Lake is just west of Cleveland.
Right.
And here we have, Tona is from Long Island. Do you know that place, Dickson?
Long Island, I've been many times to Long Island. Many times.
Hello, Reagan. Nice to meet you. Hey, look who's here.
Amy!
Hello, Amy. Amy came just to say hi to you. She came just to say hi to you. Oh, look, another person from Brazil. 3 people from Brazil. Coralie is from New South Wales. Is that what NSW is, Australia?
It is. That is exactly what it means.
New South Wales.
Yep.
Welcome. Lori and Mike are from Seattle. Giza's from Bangkok. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. That is a far one.
That is very far.
Thalia is from Davao City. Where's Davao City? Does anyone know?
No idea. No idea.
Let's see. Oh, it's in the Philippines. Look at that.
Wow.
That's far away. Holy cow. And everybody's very happy to see Amy. Hello from Miami. Hey, Dickson.
Hey.
How about that? So Andrew says the nearest land to New York is West Australia. So anyone from Perth would be the farthest away. Okay. That's very interesting. So Talia is from the Philippines. Welcome. I don't know if we've ever had someone from the Philippines before. That's pretty cool. Bremerton, Washington. Oyster Bay, Long Island. Oyster Bay, isn't that the home of Blue Oyster Cult, Dickson?
You're asking the wrong person for that one. I don't know.
You know, you're not a rock person, are you?
That's not true. No, that's not true at all. No, I have some really mainline rock groups that I really like a lot, and the Rolling Stones happens to be one of them, and Pink Floyd is another one. And,
Pullman, Washington.
Yep.
And look, there. Dickson brings class to the class.
I love it. I love it.
Jessica says, lots of people from Ohio. We should meet up for ASV 2024. That's the plan.
It's in Columbus.
In Columbus, Ohio, yeah.
Yep.
Carol is here. Carol is in California. Carol is our favorite nephrologist.
Nice.
Albany, New York. Nisacuna is near Schenectady and Albany. Thank you very much.
Got it.
Kathleen is from South New Jersey. Jacques is in São Paulo. Another Brazilian. Holy cow, 4 people from Brazil.
It's a big place.
I did come to see Dickson, says Amy.
Amy, I would come to see you anytime as long as I knew where you were.
Let's see who else is here. We found an interview with Dickson on the Colbert Report discussing vertical farming on YouTube. Folks, it's fantastic, right?
Yeah. I had a good time.
Alberto is in Riverside, California. Theodore is from Athens, Greece. Wow, that's so cool. I love all of these international.
Yeah. Now listen.
What do you mean new album by the Stones? How could they make a new album?
They did.
They
They
did.
did.
They
They
must
made
be
a new
90
album
years old. Oh my gosh.
without their drummer also, without without Charlie, and it still sounds great.
Nome, Alaska. That's very far north, Kim. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Stony Brook, Long Island. Blue Oyster Cult is from Stony Brook. Thank you, Peter. See how fast
Aha,
people respond, Dickson? That's what
they
I
do.
love.
Okay, you've got an encyclopedia out there, and all you have to do is
Mm.
just use
Yeah, Mandrake is from Long Island. And here's a definition of a naturalist: any person who studies the natural world. Naturalists make observations of the relationships between organisms. One of the most well-known examples of a naturalist is
it.
Charles Darwin. So, Dixon,
Yes,
you're in good company.
very good company. In
Would you
fact,
say I study the natural world because I study viruses?
of course you do. Of course you do. Of course,
Yeah.
you've got to know the normal before you know the abnormal. So you know your cell biology very, very well. I have deep respect for your knowledge of cell biology and biochemistry and molecular biology. You're a whiz, Vincent. That's what brought us together.
You think so?
It makes our life interesting. Of course, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, Mississauga, Ontario. I think that's the last one here.
Mississauga.
Mississauga.
Yeah, they named a rattlesnake after it.
And Parasites Without Borders is matching through January. That's right.
I
If you
believe
go to
so.
parasiteswithoutborders.com, which you can see up here, you will see that Daniel and Dickson, who run Parasites Without Borders, right, Dickson?
Yep, yep,
They are
we do.
matching. They're taking donations for Microbe TV, which is the company that oversees us, right?
That's right.
And let me fix this camera. I don't quite like it. There you go. And through January, they will match your donations. So if you give $100, they'll match it with another $100. So through January, you go to parasiteswithoutborders.com. Okay. Natalie says, check out Jazz Avengers, Dickson. I don't know what that is. Do you know
Oh,
what
I
that is?
will. I will. I will.
And Yvonne says, in the special appearance by Paul McCartney on one song on the new Stones album.
Ah,
You know,
he's still singing. He is still singing,
he
and very
is.
well, by the way. Very well. Yeah, that's my. That's you know what I never considered them a rock group, and I'll tell you why. Because their music was so eclectic and so fresh that they did a lot of cover songs, which were rock songs, but a lot of their original music was not what I would consider rock music. A lot of ballads, Blackbird, Yesterday, those kinds of songs. Uh, that's why they were differentiated from the Stones. The Stones were
Mm.
mainline, hard ass, you know, sex, rock and roll, and drugs, the whole number. But the Beatles um, they were more diverse and they were broadly based, and they it's a shame they broke up, but of course that's going to happen to most groups, and it's amazing, and it didn't happen to the Rolling Stone. Um, yeah, I like revisiting the Beatles every now and then, and listening to a lot of their music. It gives me great comfort to know that that's still available.
Mm. I think
And
this
the
is
cre-
a. Go ahead. Go
sorry,
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I saw a great interview, by the way, with I believe the lead singer for Steely Dan is Dan Fagan,
Yeah.
and Dan Fagan and a friend of his were discussing the chord changes in one of the songs that he had written. And it is such a complicated series of chord changes that happens in the blink of an eye that you hardly notice it, but it's the whole reason the song does so well is because of the way it was structured. And he took a half hour to talk about how he came up with those various changes. And the guy really knows his music. He
Mm.
truly does. And it's a shame that his lead guitar player passed because
Yeah.
I loved his music. I
Yeah.
just absolutely love his music.
They were terrific. Here's a parasite question, Dixon,
Uh
from
oh, uh
Kang.
oh.
Are there
Okay,
parasitic infections? By the way, in Chicago, uh, you were supposed to come to dinner with us, but you were tired, and then you missed Kang
I
in
did.
Chicago. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
Anyway, are there parasitic infections that reduce or eliminate allergies? Are there extracts of parasites that would do the same? How does this work?
Oh boy, it depends on how you define allergy. Um, and allergy, of course, is broadly based definition of kind of a subversion of the immune response, and it leads to some pathological consequences, like asthma and Crohn's disease, and there's a bunch of others that fall into the category of an allergic based disease. Um,
Hmm.
there are parasites that induce allergies, I can tell you that. And I know what you're driving at because a lot of data now exists with regards to using parasites to deflect the immune system back to what it was originally intended for, and that is to fight off gastrointestinal parasites. The best example I know of is the data that we have now for Crohn's disease.
Mm.
Crohn's disease doesn't exist in many places throughout the world. And if you look at the epidemiology as to why that might be, you find a large association between um, children that have heavy worm burdens, particularly gastrointestinal worm burdens, and the lack of allergies and the lack of um,
Mm.
autoimmune autoimmune diseases like Crohn's and others that fall into that same category. You take those same people and move them to places where those parasites no longer exist, and there are lots of good studies now from West Africa and the United States where portions of the families of people in West Africa have moved to the United States, and our sanitation happens to be a little bit better than most of those places where they came from. And so they don't reacquire these infections. And as a result, they start to develop allergies to various things like peanuts and shellfish and shrimp and all kinds of food allergies, which they never had before. And the epidemiological data supports the evidence that once you fall into that category of an allergic person, if you reintroduce, perhaps, and introduce is most of the cases, the worm infections that used to be there, but in a form that does no harm. So you give a low dose of, let's say, Trichuris ovis, which infects sheep, or Trichuris suis, which infects pigs. And it's similar but not identical to the Trichuris trachea that infects humans. And that infection will last 2 or 3 years, and then your immune system will eventually kick it out. Um, the allergies seem to disappear in those people, meaning the interpretation of the data is that although it's not as strong as we would like it to be to say for sure what's going on, what we think is going on is that the immune system was originally designed to take care of those worm infections. But since there are no more targets, they do target practice. And target practice means that they find a target that's similar but different from the target that they were originally selected for by evolution. And instead of eliminating the parasitic worms, they start to attack cells in the gut tract which contain antigenic signatures which cross react with those parasitic infections. Now, how that happens, that's another topic. But
Okay.
the fact is that they've found some associations between some columnar epithelial cells in the gut tract and antigenic signatures from intestinal parasites,
Okay.
mostly nematodes. So and how does it work? It's just a simple deflection to put the immune system back on target rather than taking target practice, give them the real targets.
Here's one kind of a virus one. Given the
Uh-oh.
conspiracy advocates' reaction to pull off its posts, can you imagine the reaction if the next new vaccine say for Epstein-Barr was to develop in China. So, Dickson, we just did that paper right on Friday.
We just did it, and guy, you might want to take this one.
So that paper is right out of China, and the vaccine looks very good.
It does.
So, um, I think it would have to be tested in the U.S., of course. But yes, a lot of people would probably not like it. They'd think they were putting a microchip in you to track your brain waves or something. Yeah, it's true. I suspect it would be I don't even know if they would want it to be tested in the U.S.
Yeah,
I
but if
just
it
don't know.
works, it'll eventually will be tested in the United States for sure.
Yeah.
It looked very, very promising.
So
You're
Dixon,
absolutely right.
so this book, The New City. Let's talk a little bit
Ah,
about this.
yeah, sure.
This is it's
Where
about
did
the
that come
future.
from?
It's about the future city, right?
It is. It
By the way,
is.
if you want to buy this, you can go to despommier.com. There's a link right above Dixon's head,
Right.
and it's a very nice book. Um,
Thank you.
by the way, Dixon, I brought this back from ASTMH. You said you
Oh,
wanted
good
it
man.
back.
Well, no, you can have that. You have a
No,
copy.
Amy would like a signed copy.
Oh, well, I would love to give her one.
So maybe I
So,
can bring this. Maybe you can come to the incubator sometime
sure,
and
no problem.
sign it, and then I'll send it to her or something. Anyway,
Absolutely
so
no
what?
problem. So,
Why did
so
you're a
this,
parasitologist, Dixon? What are you writing
I
this
know.
book for?
What the heck is going on there? Well, if you go into the book, you'll see some pictures of parasites because in order to talk about where we live, you have to talk about all of the external factors that make up the essential niche of humans. When I say the essential niche, I'm talking about the biology, the chemistry, and the physics, but also the sociology of where people live and how they treat themselves,
Mm,
uh, whether or not we are an entity and worthy of all of the attention of, let's say, a municipal government, or are we just a cog in the wheel of progress that needs to be oiled by, let's say, giving us more money or better food or perhaps cleaner water, but not all of that at once. And the main thing that counts in a city is commerce. All right. And I don't think you're going to find one person living in the modern Western world, at least, that would disagree with that.
mm,
That's the Adam Smith model that was developed back in the 1800s that we adopted and stuck with because it was so successful. And the Industrial Revolution didn't hurt in terms of jump starting our ability to provide most of the essentials that we now take for granted in our lives, all of the electronics, all of the comfort zone, mechanical devices like refrigerators and washing machines, and all of those things that have very large carbon footprints, by the way, to manufacture and to get the materials for them. Uh, we have created a world where um, the center of the city is not dedicated to people, it's dedicated to the production of gross national product for that city. And it's interesting because you can actually see that from about 200 miles up if you go into the International Space Station. I've got a lot of pictures in the book that actually shows what it's like to look at Paris at night, or what it's like to look at London at night, or what it's like to look at New York City at night. And when you look at all those places, it's so easy to tell where the center of the city is because all the roads lead there.
mm.
You know that old expression, all the roads lead to Rome. All the roads of Rome lead to the center of Rome. They lead to the forum. They lead to the place where business occurs. Uh, Business to bigger and better the city and the government of that city, and also to keep out the invaders, which want a little piece of the action. So you need to protect your interests. And that's why a lot of cities had walls around them for a while and that sort of thing. At any rate, I got to thinking about this because I've lived in a city or near a city. I've worked in a city certainly all my life. And I have an opinion about cities that I would like to express. And that's that the opinion of that arose from another class that I taught like the Vertical Farm book arose in a classroom at Columbia. The New City book arose in a classroom that I taught at Fordham. And the name of that course was Ecology for Designers. I no longer teach at Fordham, but I did up until last year. And we had 10 years worth of exposure to this idea that if you're unhappy with the city you live in, well, then why don't you design one that you would be happy in? And what would it take to make you completely at ease and comfortable living in a large, crowded place with a lot of other people that you don't even know? And it's not an easy question to answer because everybody's likes and dislikes varies, but all of them seem to center around individual freedom and health. And the more individual freedom and healthier life you can live,
Hmm.
the more the city that's the kind of city I want to live in. All right. So what is wrong? I queried my classes every year as to what they thought was wrong with the city that they lived in, which was New York. And they all came up with various answers. A lot of them apologized for being late for class because the transportation system wasn't as effective as they thought it should be, and they missed their train or they missed their bus or they missed their subway, um, or the driver got lost or they had a flat tire or they ran into traffic or they closed that road or that sort of thing. Unreliable municipal services, which ultimately slows the city down in terms of commerce. But it also creates havoc among people that live there every day and have to come and go from work and go home and then come back to work and then go home and then come back to work. Vincent, you're into that cycle right now, and I used to be in that cycle also. And it's you half of your day is spent wondering whether you'll get home on time and wondering what you have to pick up from the store in order to have a nice dinner or to make your kids happy because you forgot, to get something the last time you said you would. A whole bunch of things conspire to make us want to remodel the city. But the biggest one of all that I think is the driving force in all of this, for me at least, is the statement that came out of the United Nations. Vincent, it's in the book. I wonder if you wouldn't mind reading it. You can
Where
find it.
is it?
It's early on in the book. I've got a copy of it right here. Just happened to have a copy. And it states unequivocally that contribute, uh, cities are only occupy 2% of the land mass of the world. If you put all the cities together, the amount of land that all of those cities together would equals about 2% of all the land mass of Earth. But if you ask what is the contribution of all of those cities to our carbon footprint,
Hmm.
to the greenhouse gases that are emitted, cities emit 60% of the world's greenhouse gases.
Sixty
And that's a
percent. Yeah, that's a lot.
60% from 2% of the landmass, but of course,
Mm.
50% of the population is crammed into that 2% of the landmass. I mean, that's how many people live in the city right now, about more than 50% actually. And more will live in a city as time goes on because living in the country has become more problematic as a result of climate change. Okay, so climate change is the driving force behind the need to redesign. And so then you have to ask yourself, well, if I were in charge of things, what would I do? Where would I start? How could I possibly, as an individual, have make a difference in terms of the way cities behave? And all you'd have to do is point out the fact that cities are unsafe places. They're not just unsafe because of the transportation systems that are most of the time reliable, but in many cases they're not. And if you travel to a place like Nairobi, Africa, in Kenya, uh, the amount of deaths from road accidents is horrendous compared to a lot of other places throughout the world. Or to, let's say, um, Mexico City, which has a very high mortality rate among drivers, the driving public. But people who walk or take their bicycles, they're also at risk. And some of you, if you look at this as a fearful, I have to go to work and my life might be at stake getting there. And of course, then you have to come back. So, how can we reduce or even eliminate that as a risk factor? How can we make this a people friendly place, not just for transportation, but also for the work environment, also for nutrition? How do we handle our wastes? Where do we get our fresh water from? How do we generate our energy that makes all this work and yet without despoiling the environment? And you might say, well, that's ridiculous. You can't do that. You just can't. Well, the idea that
Mm.
about 20 years ago, I'd say that you were right, but you're not right anymore because we have a lot of alternatives now that we can employ in order to generate carbon-free energy, like geothermal, for instance, or wind, or solar, or even nuclear, if you're willing to go that far. But there are other technologies on the horizon which are now emerging and are getting a lot of attention from developers. And the one that is the most attractive for me is the hydrogen fuel cell, but we'll get back to that. So I started to think about in the class and outside of the class also, how many things would you have to change in your living environment in order to make it acceptable to your great grandchildren, who you don't even know yet because they haven't happened yet, but they will happen. And when they do, they will blame you for this. If things haven't changed, you're the one they'll point the finger to. And they say, if my great grandfather had only been more attentive, that guy was the mayor of this city and he didn't do anything. Or she was in charge of the nutrition for the entire state of New York in the school systems and they did nothing. In fact, they just bent over backwards to try to balance the budget, but they didn't actually make headway in terms of correcting some of the major flaws in those systems. So our job right now is to look ahead at least that far and say, okay, what would you change in order to correct some of the biggest problems? And the students grabbed right onto this, by the way. They loved working on this because nobody was there to say you can't do that.
Mm.
In fact, I was saying you better do that, otherwise. And by the way, you can go online, and the website is called Fortumopolis, as if it were a Greek city. Fortumopolis, and in Fortumopolis, Vincent helped me greatly with putting that up on the internet. It's still on the internet, and it's 7 years worth of this concept run by the students, and then putting them in charge of actually coming up with their own version of a city which meets all the requirements for reducing or eliminating greenhouse gases, uh, generating all of its electricity by renewable energy sources, uh, feeding the city by making all the buildings that are in that city designed in such a way as they can contain some portion of the vertical farm concept that I was telling you about a little earlier. And then, and also, what about the city itself? What are we going to make it out of? And that's one of the biggest problems of a city right now. What are most cities, the buildings made out of? And the answer is glass, um, steel, and concrete. And if you look at those three building materials and then look at the carbon footprint that they generate just in acquiring the materials to start with, the raw materials have to be mined from some place and
Mm.
then transported to a manufacturing center, which pollutes like crazy to make steel, or pollutes like crazy to make glass, or pollutes like. And I spent a year in Toledo, as you mentioned earlier. Toledo is the ninth largest city in the United States, but it's one of the biggest cities in the world for glass manufacturing. And they make plate glass for cars. That's their biggest deal. And they make household glassware, which are not the finest of crystalline glassware that you'd find in some of the hoity-toity stores on Rodeo Boulevard in
Mm.
California. These are glasses that you break routinely every time you go to put them in a dishwasher. So you have to replace them, of course. And who makes those glasses? Well, Libby Owens Glass, and I got associated with that group a little bit while I was out in Toledo. At any rate, that's high energy stuff. You have to melt sand basically in order to start with, and to make a plate glass window, for instance. Okay, so that's all energy intensive. So what are all our building alternatives? And that's pillar number one. We have four pillars altogether in this book. I won't bore you with all the details, but I just want you to know that if you built out of wood, and a special kind of wood, not the kind that we use today to build houses with, that's too flimsy and it's too fire prone. It'll burn if you set a match to it, and the next thing you know, you'll look and there's no more home. And the reason is that the lumber that's used to make the home with is not thick enough to be a fire retardant. But if you're a tree and you live in a forest and you're more than, let's say, 10 or 15 years old, you're more than 9 or 10 inches in diameter. If a forest fire comes through and burns off all your branches and burns all your leaves off, you're still standing in the end. The trunk of the tree remains because the tree is so dense that the oxygen can't get through to burn off the inner core of that tree. So we've created a wood product which mimics the density of a tree, and
Mm.
it's called cross laminated timber. And cross laminated timber, if you guys out there and girls out there, or ladies and gentlemen, are listening and you're at your computers and you just typed out the word cross laminated timber buildings, 2 words, it's a hyphenated word, cross laminated. You will be stunned. If you don't know about this, you will be stunned at the beauty of these buildings, at the convenience of manufacturing, which can all be done offsite. And then pieces of the building can be shipped to the building site and assembled as if you were putting together a set of Lincoln logs. And you can construct a 10 to 12-story building in a matter of weeks compared
Mm.
to a matter of months, or sometimes it might even take a year for a building more than 30 stories tall to be put together with a steel and concrete and glass facade. So this building material, by the way, just so happens that it's made out of carbon. And if you look at this material from another perspective, then the building itself is a carbon sink. It actually captures carbon and it keeps that out of the atmosphere simply by being wood. Wood is 50% carbon. There are lots of other things it's made out of too, but it's 50% carbon. So if you total up the tonnage of how much carbon you use to make the building with, that's a significant dent in the amount of carbon that you can store. So if you have a renewable resource, which is a tree, and if you harvest trees that are between 15 and 20 years old, and you continue to do this and use those trees to manufacture the cross laminated timber with, and there are some excellent YouTubes, by the way, showing how cross laminated timber is actually made, you'll be absolutely startled to realize that if we were to just switch from current building materials to cross laminated timber, keep the glass. I'll tell you what to do with that in a minute. You can construct a building that's fire resistant, even more fire resistant than a lot of steel and uh, glass and concrete buildings, because there's a lot of wood on the inside of these buildings that decorate people's offices and things like this. So when you see a fire in a large skyscraper, the steel isn't burning, but everything else is: the furniture, the floors, the ceilings, lots of the wood in that construction material
But
goes.
it could get hot enough eventually to melt the steel. No.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. As we saw with regards to the World Trade Center,
Yeah.
which was not steel, that was mostly aluminum and titanium, but it still melted and it collapsed on its own weight.
Yeah.
Um, so cross-laminated timber started in Europe back in the 2000s. It was discovered by a graduate student at Graz University in Vienna and popularized and absolutely revolutionized the way the building industry and throughout Europe looked at this. And you know what else it does? Of course, it creates a vital need for careful managed forests.
Hmm.
And that's what if the farmers of America were to switch from farming corn to farming trees by not planting them, but simply by sitting on their porch, sipping their mint juleps, and watching all those trees grow back. And they didn't have to lift a finger. They will grow back all by themselves. And once they reach a certain age, they are absolute prime targets for harvesting and turning into cross laminated timber. And so this is one way of revitalizing wildlife and also creating a renewed timber industry with a purpose, and that is to replace all of these aging buildings that we have throughout the cities of the world with
Dixon,
newer. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
are there any in New York City?
There are a few. All right, there are a few, and if you ask me which ones right now, I can't actually tell you. But if you go online and just type out where are what's the nearest cross-laminated timber building to where I live? And if you live in Wisconsin, for instance, all you have to do is go to Milwaukee, and they have the world's no, I'm sorry, this is the tallest cross-laminated timber building in North America. It's I think 14 stories tall. There's one in Minneapolis called the T3 building. It captures over 3,600 tons of carbon
Mm,
in the form of wood. That's never going to go anyplace if they leave that building like it is. Oh, that's another thing. If you want to repurpose these buildings for whatever reason, you don't like it, or it's outgrown its usefulness, or you want to change the purpose of the neighborhood and therefore you have to get rid of this building, you can disassemble these cross laminated timber buildings like you
mm,
assemble them and repurpose those materials to make another building with it. So
right,
it's got really advantages. It's really and it's cheaper, stronger, and it's renewable. The biggest two reasons it's renewable and it's carbon capture. So that's my biggest plug in this book is let's change the building ethic to one which encourages the use of cross laminated timber instead of all these other outdated building materials which have no real permanent place in the world if you look because it's not a renewable resource. All right, there was an article just I think it was in the Sunday Times about people are depleting the beaches of sand to make glass with, and this is going to have
yeah,
a
yeah,
horrible effect on wildlife throughout the world because the beaches will not be behaving the way they used to be. I mean, you just think of mating turtles coming back to a beach that's all pebbles. Where the hell are they going to dig that pit for their eggs from? For instance, and that that's a trivial problem because if all the turtles were to disappear, I don't think our lives would be changed in a major way. But we don't know because we haven't done that experiment yet. And I don't recommend it either. Okay, so my book leans heavily on cross-laminated timber as the number one thing. If we change that, uh, there's a lot of other things that would happen as a result, all of which are good in terms of renewal of life's wildlife. You're wilding the portions of the world that now are devoted to things like corn and other agricultural products. You're going to say, well, where's our food going to come from? Well, the same building that's made out of cross laminated timber will have some portion of it set aside for vertical farming as well. So that's number two. Number two is food production. Cities could probably, if every building in the city made some food item, and that no one would tell you which one to grow. You like garlic? Okay, grow garlic. You like tomatoes? Do that. You like celery? Do that. You like leafy greens? Do that. But everybody will end up doing something different. And if you can imagine in New York City, which has about a million buildings, with a million different products. Well, there aren't a million different products to actually farm, but you could probably supply 90% of all the world's cuisines with the varieties of vegetables and fruits um, and related vegetative products, edible vegetables that you could conjure up. So that's pillar number two. Cities can feed themselves. They can carbon capture. You can design a building also to trap all of the water that falls on it.
Hmm.
Now you say, what?
Mm-hmm.
What? What are you talking about? So again, I like to use New York City as the example because not everybody, but a lot of people have been to New York and a lot of people are amazed that, wow, it's such a beautiful place and there's a lot of big buildings and don't come when it rains, okay? Because if you do, uh, we have a combined sewer system in New York City. The sewage and the runoff into the sewers are
Hmm.
mixed, so that by the time they get to the sewage treatment plant, you've got twice the volume that you would ordinarily have, and as a result, the sewage overflows the catchment basins inside those plants, and
Hmm.
raw sewage leaks out into the Hudson River estuary to despoil the environment. And it happens on a regular basis, and it will happen more and more as climate change continues to alter the precipitation patterns throughout the world. Now, New York City is 300 square miles in footprint.
Hmm.
How much rain do you think that represents over a year's period? And New York City gets 47 inches of rain a year. Okay, 47 inches, that's a reasonable amount of water, but
A
you
year, 47 inches a year.
47 inches of rain per year, and it's a
Okay.
300 square mile footprint.
That's
So
2 billion
the,
gallons of water a year.
it's more than that. It's 250 billion gallons of
Wow. I
water.
was 10 times off.
Yeah, 250 billion gallons. It's half of what New York City uses in a year
Hmm.
in order to quench its thirst, let's say. That we use 1.2 billion gallons of water every day. And we clean up and throw back into the environment 1 billion gallons of that water every day in the form of wastewater.
Hmm.
Now, by the way, if you ask Mother Nature uh, what she does with her wastewater, she'll just laugh at you and say, we don't have wastewater. We use every drop because it's so valuable that we store it and we use it again, and we use it again, and we use it again. The hardwood forest it's my model for the way a city should behave in terms of a natural system. Now, someone said I was a naturalist. I'm flattered and honored to be a member of that group. And if you're a naturalist, then you start to wonder how the world works. And one of the big issues that I have is connected to what I like to do as a hobby, and I like to trout fish. Now, I trout fish in a humane way. You might say, yeah, you torture those poor little animals and then you throw them back. Well, I do throw them back, and I kiss them all and I apologize for scaring them. But I enjoy the
I've
act
seen
of
you do
catching.
that.
Yeah, we actually floated a river together out in Montana. We had a good time. The point is that the river itself is totally dependent upon the banks on either side to have a full-fledged forest, which keeps the soil in place. It keeps the water in place that rains, and it doesn't allow it to wash into the river and then silt the river and cover over the rocks and kill off the insects that live under the rocks that is the trout food. So that it's all interconnected, and if you disrupt one part of that, you screw up the whole thing. Okay, so that's what you learn when you start to study how nature solves their problems.
That was
And
pillar 2, right?
yeah, that's pillar two. No, that's pillar three. Pillar three is collecting rainwater. Every building in the city will collect rainwater, and they will store it in a cistern in the base of the building.
Hmm.
And that water you don't even have to drink that water. You could use that water for heating and cooling. And that those systems exist now, and they are remarkably efficient. And the amount of energy it takes to pump water through a building
Mm.
to remove the heat from the building and cool it down in the summer, or to store the heat and to distribute that in the wintertime is remarkably efficient. And that's the way Mother Nature does it also, because the leaves themselves transpire the water and the temperature calms down and it absolutely maintains homeostasis for a very large tract of carbon capturing plant material. So I want the city to behave the same way. I want it to mimic, using technology, the best features of a hardwood forest. And
Dixon,
it's, yeah, go ahead.
I'm laughing because Visto said you gave trout herpes.
What do you think they gave me?
That is so funny.
Yeah, well, I don't kiss them on the lips. That's the one thing I
You
learned
just
not to
kiss their
do.
skin, right?
Yeah, just on the top of their heads, like you pat them on the head and thanks very much for the ride and hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I don't think they did, of course. But it was a fun thing to do. It's just a fun thing to do. But it teaches you that it's a valuable resource. And if it's so valuable to you, then you want to preserve it. If you preserve trout, you have to preserve its environment. And that includes not just the river, but it includes the land on either side of that river. And then you have to know how that works. And that's what got me into this to begin with, because I've seen so many of my trout streams disappear,
Mm.
and they've turned into sewer disposal units basically for cities and for small towns and large towns as well. The one I live in, Fort Lee, New Jersey, does that. All the towns around here do it. Vincent, you live in the central part of New Jersey, but they do it there too. When the treatment plants are finished with the water, where the hell does it go? They've got to put it somewhere. So they put it
Hmm.
into the nearest river. And they say, oh, no, 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 we treat that water. That's all good water. That's actually not true. It's not the
Is there a
same
building
water.
in San Francisco that
Yeah, there
uses
is one. There's a building in San Francisco that's called the Salesforce Building. And the Salesforce Building was the first new building to fall underneath the new legislature edict from the city council of San Francisco that said
mm,
every building from now on that's over a certain height must recycle every drop of their own water and reuse it. And we will not grant you any more water than we have already started to grant you. And you can't just continue to use water irresponsibly. You've got to start to conserve it. So they were very clever in that they looked to Orange County, California, which is further south from there, for the answers to how to do this.
hmm
So Orange County had the same problem. The EPA said every time you throw polluted water into the Pacific Ocean, we're going to charge you. And Long Beach, California, for instance, in one of those cities, and a lot of others also said, "That's okay, go ahead, we can afford it." And they said, "Really? Well, then we'll just keep upping the fee until you can't afford it. And at that point, you'll have to do something." That happened in New York City too, by the way. The EPA made New York City stop dumping its sludge 10 miles off the coast of New York. They created a dead zone that's still there, by the way.
mm.
So, okay, so when that law passed, the Salesforce building fell underneath that law. And what they did was they went to the Orange County and they said, "Well, how are you guys doing it?" And they recycle all their water. They don't throw anything out. They recycle it, but no one would drink it. And that's too bad because it's very drinkable water. Even Bill Gates Jr. went there and said, "Look, our foundation funded this project. I will show you how good it is." And he went over to one of the taps on the outside of this building. And he turned it on. He filled up a glass of what looked like water, and he drank it. And the next day, after he finished in the emergency room in the hospital, no, he was fine. Nothing happened. Um, but they still didn't buy into it. So what they do in Long Beach and in other communities is they take their wastewater, purify it, and then they truck it up into the San Bernardino Mountains and other related mountain areas around the cities, and they dump it out. onto
Mm-hmm.
the ground, and they repercolate, refresh the aquifer, and then they draw their drinking water out of the ground. And everybody will drink that because that's what they used to do anyway. But this is all recycled water. So the Salesforce building in San Francisco now recycles virtually every drop of water. The toilet water, the water you wash your hands with, the water you make your coffee with that you don't finish and you throw down the drain. All of that water is recycled the same way that Orange County, on a larger scale, recycles all of its water. And I might add that the Salesforce building Board of Trustees got the idea from knowing that the Gates Foundation would probably fund the first project to prove that a building can do the same thing as an entire county. And they were right. The Gates Foundation funded their project as well. So I think, and economically speaking, that means that there never needs to be a water shortage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's three out of the four pillars. Let's say we carbon capture, we grow our food, we keep water circulating. It's a circular economy. We only have one thing left, and that's energy.
Ah,
And that's
that's the big one.
the sticky point. It's the point which nobody wants to change. All right. When I even say nobody, the people who are impacted most by air pollution due to fossil fuel burning, they want to change. But they don't have much of a voice because they live in very poor neighborhoods in most cases, and no one listens to them. And those communities were put there because the governments could do that. Okay. But if you were to live in, let's say, Grosse Pointe, Michigan, or some of the fancier neighborhoods in any state that you can mention, and they put a coal burning power plant next door to you, they'd never in a million years have a chance of doing that. They would vote that out of existence, and they would move it, and they would keep moving it until the vote didn't matter anymore. And that's what's basically that's called environmental injustice. And we have a lot of examples of that, and it's unfortunate because the people with the least amount of voice are the most impacted groups, and they continue to suffer greatly as a result of this. And my book also talks a lot about that because I think water and air are two of the most important things in your life. That if you don't have either one of those that are drinkable or breathable, then it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter too
Yeah.
much as to what else happens to you. Okay, so energy. What about energy? So we have a lot of great options now, which we didn't have, let's say, 20 years ago. Maybe we might have had a little bit of it, but I don't think we had commercially robust industries for, let's say, solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
And solar panels are now almost 28% efficient at converting sunlight to electricity. And that's more than enough that you need to actually use that as your main source of electricity. We see a lot of industries, like I'm most familiar with the vertical farm industry. I think almost half of the vertical farms of the world right now have some form of renewable energy capture system to lower their energy costs so they can compete with the outdoor farmers. That was the one area where the farmer had a big advantage. Sunshine is free, energy is free. Of course, it's not free when you plow the land up, and it's not free when you plant the seeds, and it's not free when you weed in order to make sure that your crop succeeds at the expense of all the other plant life that wants in. Uh, it's still not a balanced equation. But when you hear the outdoor farmer talk about it, or you hear the lobby groups for outdoor farming, not necessarily the farmers themselves, they will always defend themselves by saying, our energy is free, and here you are using all this electricity. You're the ones at fault, not us. And in fact, even if you used as much energy as they did to produce your plants, you don't have plowing, you don't have planting that takes up the kind of energy that we're talking about. It's all done by hand. And of course, every plant that you plant succeeds, whereas outdoors only about 70% succeeds. So there's a lot of differences between outdoor and indoor farming. But the fact is that if we don't learn how to capture energy from the sun in some way, and that includes wind, and it doesn't include geothermal, but it does include wind power, tidal power, solar power. Those are the three that are
Hmm.
commercially available as we speak. And the one that's the most promising that's commercially available right now is geothermal. So geothermal energy has found a way to take a power plant. And this now, what I'm suggesting is that every building is their own power plant so that we don't have a grid of energy, so that nothing can go wrong to the entire system. If one building goes down, one building goes down. If the system goes down now, all the buildings go down. And we learn
Hmm.
this from events like Hurricane Sandy and that sort of thing. You see that every time we have an ice storm and all the telephone lines go down, everybody suffers. So we don't want that to happen in our city. So we don't have grids. We're not worried about it. So okay, so the energy grid is going to take advantage of a new finding, relatively new. It's about 10 years old, where you take a solution, a very special chemical solution, and you paint the outside of a window, an ordinary plate glass window, with this fluid. It's a clear fluid. It dries clear, and it's impervious to rain, everything else. It's now a clear photovoltaic cell. This solution that's been conjured up by um, groups at MIT, Michigan State University, and several other places now allows an ordinary window to be retrofitted to behave like the classical photovoltaics that you can see on the rooftops of buildings now. So that if you could convert all of the glass in, let's say, a large city like New York, of course, but there are many, many others that have lots of plate glass windows, and that's the style of putting up a building now. Now you've got your energy problems solved, and it's a coming area which I think will have legs for a long time. But there's one even better than that, which is
Can I
emerging
ask,
in
can I ask
places.
a
Yeah,
question
yeah,
about
yeah.
the
No,
paint?
no. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So obviously, you have to have wires coming out of that window, right?
Well, they don't come out of the window. There's an electrode that goes all the way around the edge of the window.
Okay,
And
got
what
it.
happens is the electrons are displaced by the photons that come in from the sun,
Yep.
and they migrate to the edge of the window, and they are picked up by this electrode.
Okay. Okay.
And then
And
that is the network.
then there must be have batteries for
With your long-term storage, yes, that's correct.
yeah.
Whatever amount of energy you don't use, you have to in some way store that or put it back onto another grid.
Got it.
Okay, so there are lots of opportunities here, though. The ones that I've heard about are quite inventive. Like, for instance, did you know that excess energy can be used to compress air? And if you compress air enough,
No, I didn't know.
then when you release the pressure slowly and you have a flywheel that's turned by the stream of compressed air, you can generate electricity. And so you can store energy in the form of compressed air. Another way of storing energy is in the form of heat. So they have what they call sand batteries. The battery is not quite a battery. It's a large container filled with pure sand,
Hmm.
and the heat that's stored in this super insulated container is enough to boil water,
Wow.
and so that the energy never stops being produced. In the daytime, it's produced by sunlight. At night, it's produced by the steam created by the heat from the stored heat in these what they call sand batteries. And there are lots of places using them now too, by the way, particularly in places like semi-arid regions like Las Vegas, uh, Phoenix, places that have a lot of sunlight. Saudi Arabia, the whole Middle East. You can imagine how useful this technology will be for places that have the right geography. Okay, so that's already there. But but you can say, that's they've got the advantage. We don't have that advantage here. There's something else called a hydrogen fuel cell. So the hydrogen fuel cell has been around for a long time. We've known that if you take pure oxygen and pure hydrogen and combine them together, they form water, which is a pollutant of this fuel cell, but you can use that, of course, and it generates a tremendous amount of heat. The heat of the chemical reaction that results in the formation of water. It
Mm.
gives off a lot of heat as a result. And that heat can be captured. And that heat can be used to boil water, another source of water, which is close by the fuel cell. That water then generates steam. The steam drives a turbine. The turbine generates electricity, and that's how the fuel cell works. The byproduct is water. So if you can find a way to hydrolyze water by using solar energy and then a storage battery at night, if you have to generate energy through the evening and into the next day, which is now being worked on,
Hmm.
then you've got a continuous production of energy that can start with water and it ends with water. In Germany, I'm told, I don't have the evidence for this, but I've read this from a relatively reliable source, the Huffington Report, that most or all of the commercial railroad trains in Germany, all of the engines now run on hydrogen fuel cell power.
Mm.
All of there, it's an easy conversion, by the way, and it takes up much less room, and it's not a battery running thing like you have in electric cars now. But so fuel cells, I believe, and it's a belief at this point because the data is not 100% clear because they are worried about where you're going to get your hydrogen from. Okay, so the hydrogen can be scavenged out of the smokestack of a coal burning power plant. And I would not recommend that as a constant source of reliable hydrogen because I want those fuels, I want carbon based fuel to go out of business. I just want them to go away because they cause more harm than they do good. That doesn't sound right, but it is absolutely true. They despoil the environment, they pollute the air, they cause spills where there's liquids involved, like liquid nitrate, liquid natural gas, and oil. It's a big mess. It's a gigantic mess, and I think that mess deserves to. It's had its time. It's generated the industrial revolution to the point where it is now. But we're smarter than that. We can take care of ourselves in a better way. We can use the current cutting edge technologies to overcome the difficulties that are now associated with fossil fuels. And you can see what happened in Dubai over these last couple of weeks, where one of the co-hosts, who happened to be a very large oil generating magnate in the Middle East and a Dubai resident, was in charge of this meeting. And when challenged with the fact that fossil fuels are harmful, and particularly oil, he absolutely tried to rebuttal them. He tried everything he could to convince them that they were wrong, and the evidence is still out. It sounded like a cigarette manufacturer saying we have to do more research, and in fact, here's a couple of $1 million. Go out and do some more research and see if cigarettes cause cancer. We've been down that road many times, and I think we're tired of it. We're tired of being lied to. We're tired of being treated like second-rate citizens. And when I wrote this book, I wrote it from the standpoint of, we're mad as hell and we ain't going to take it no more. And so that's the last um, linchpin of the new city. Every building will have the capacity for generating its own energy, its own food. It will capture water, and it's made out of wood. It doesn't get better than that. So I hope I live long enough to at least see a small version of this made as a proof of concept, because I know that people are working on this now. And all these technologies are out there. I didn't suggest one thing that hasn't been done. In fact, they're all commercially available, all of them. So there's no reason why we can't at least try it. You have to try. It's a rice farm in the the Persona O2 building in Tokyo. I know that picture very well. The executives in that building that work, it was a human resource building. They raised so many different kinds of food items in that building that they went to lunch every day by shopping for their lunch. They filled up a tray of unprocessed produce, handed it to the chef, and the chef created a meal for them on the spot. And every day was different.
That's solar
Uh,
farm, isn't it?
a big, big solar farm. You're seeing a lot of that now. And
Yeah.
you might say, well, those are harmful to the environment, aren't they? Not as much as oil, of course, but would you believe that you can build those solar panels high enough off the ground to allow animals to graze underneath them? And you can raise
Yeah.
shade
Cool.
tolerant plants underneath them.
I know they put parking lots underneath solar panels
They
also, but
do, they do. Or they put
yeah,
them on your roof. Or they put
yeah.
them
So
wherever
this
that you can allow
this
them.
this is the book. Go buy it, folks. You can buy it at Amazon. You could go to despommier.com. It's got all the links for purchasing. I feel like these talk show guys that hold the book up, Colbert, right? Go buy it. It's
I can
really
do that.
good. All the things Dickson has talked about, the four pillars, a lot of discussion. Let's take some questions here, Dickson. We have a lot of questions
Absolutely.
that have
You
been
bet. You bet. You bet. You
adding up.
bet.
So here's one from Andrew. Question for
Yeah,
Dickson. I've heard that a city designed with disabled people in mind creates a better environment for all living there. Would you agree?
absolutely. Absolutely. If you can, and I, too bad I can't go out and get my walking sticks for you. I happen to be one of those people. I've had a serious back operation. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. I'll get along just fine. But I'm, I don't walk the same as I used to. And before they put in these curbs that went right down to the road level, people who had my condition had to sort of try to stumble their way up onto the sidewalk
Mm.
and back out to cross the street. So yeah, absolutely. Everybody's life gets better. If you can take care of the weakest link in the chain, then the whole chain gets stronger. I agree. Absolutely.
All right. Tona says, how much worse would pollution be if there were sprawl?
Ha! Go to Los Angeles. You can find out for yourself. You don't have to ask that question. You could just go
Mm.
look at it. Sprawl invades natural environment. Okay, and it displaces wildlife. And when you start doing that on a large scale, then you start paying the price. And Vincent and I, co-host several Twix shows this week in parasitism and this week in virology. That it's living proof of the fact that when you disturb nature, nature disturbs back, and the untold consequences are only obvious after you do the experiment, only after you encroach. And you're not always sure what you're going to get, but it's never for the benefit of the people living there. It's usually a horrible disease like dengue or um, leishmaniasis, or I can go down a big list. I mean, I would rather not do that, but yeah, it's and pollution. Would pollution be worse? Absolutely. Sprawl is the worst offender with regards to trying to control the very thing that's causing the most harm to the future of that crowded population. Yeah.
All right. Airy Ozone says your book is brilliant, inspiring, visionary thoughts on how to get your four pillars implemented, and meantime, how to get it reviewed in mainstream publications like the New York Times.
Yeah, well, I've got to thank you for saying that. And I would appreciate if you get the book, I would appreciate your writing a review and submitting it to Amazon because we've only got four, count them, four reviews so far. I know a lot of people have bought this book already, so I encourage you to write a review and to submit it to a place that actually where it matters. All of my, this is produced by Columbia University Press, so they have people working not night and day, but they were certainly working hard during the daytime to try to get this book into as many places as they could. So take a guess as to why it hasn't been reviewed in most of these mainstream places yet. And The answer is Gaza. The answer is Hamas. The answer is
Mm.
Israel. The answer is Ukraine. The answer is Russia. The answer is COVID. The answer is you name it. The answer is the actors' strike. The answer was there was a whole slew of perfect wave events which interrupted the normal flow of commerce, basically, including book reviews and
Yep.
things of this sort. But it's back on track now, and I think we'll be okay.
Uh, Sarah says TWIP is one of the reasons I decided to go back to school this year for
Ah,
biology at 40 years old. So I just wanted to
it's not
thank
old.
you both.
That's not old. That's not even middle age anymore.
Yeah. All right. Bus Driving One says, is a bad bike lane better than no bike lane? We have several that suddenly end only to restart on the other side of a difficult intersection or are too narrow for traffic and parked in.
Oh boy, I'm not an expert at this, but I can tell you what happens when you eliminate bicycles and you favor cars instead. And that happened in China almost overnight. I uh, I had the privilege of being in Beijing two different times. One was during the construction of the Olympics stadia. And then I was there another time later on. The first time I was there, I was absolutely stunned by where I was, and there was a lot of air pollution, and there was a lot of things like this. But there were tons of people riding bicycles. I mean, almost everybody rode a bicycle. The next time I was there, which was about 5 years later, I couldn't find a bicycle. Everybody was driving cars, and the air was even worse because Beijing has lousy air. They get big dust storms coming down from the Gobi Desert, and they have horrible, horrible air quality. And by the way, they had something like 50 steel mills within a 100-mile radius of Beijing. They shut them down for the Olympics so that there was no air pollution to speak of, but they turned them right back on again as soon as the Olympics was over.
All right. Kang says, is anonymity an attraction or an anathema to living in a city?
Oh, don't be anonymous. No, make yourself heard. I think, yeah, but it depends on where you live, and I know you live in China. Um, it's rough when you speak out, and you've got a government that discourages that, or even punishes you for that, and so you
Mm.
have to be very careful, and you have to watch what you say, and you have to watch where you step. That has to change, and I don't know. The only way to change it is through elections and the democratization, obviously, and you can see how popular that's been lately. So, I'm not very encouraging as to what to do in the immediate future, but the only way to bring about change is to admit that change is necessary and then do it. And I'm sure that in a democratic society, at least, you can take a vote on this, and sometimes you can get change to occur. In places where you don't have that option, you get thrown in jail. I'm just
Tona,
sorry to say that.
Tona says, what department was this Fordham class? Urban Studies,
Oh, yeah.
Architecture?
No, interestingly enough, it was in the art department uh, in the Lincoln Center campus, and the guy who recruited me was in the architecture department in the graduate school in the Fordham campus up near the Bronx Botanical Gardens. But I taught in the Lincoln Center campus, and so I taught in the art and design um, department. So I justified doing that by saying nature's grandest design is the ecosystem. So let's study how an ecosystem works
Mm.
as a natural
Yep.
foil for the way we should be behaving because we are part of that natural system. We just have lost track of that, but we really are part of it. And I got them to buy into that. And I taught them enough ecology to make them dangerous. In the second half of the course, they took over and created these Swartomopolis examples that you can read about if you want. We're very proud of them. All undergraduates, none of them had science backgrounds. And by the end of the term, they all wanted to be scientists. So I thought that was,
It's good.
uh,
It's a good
yeah,
achievement.
good. I thought it was good. I thought it was good.
Dixon, you don't teach it anymore, though, right?
No, I fully retired as the end of this year. I think I've had a few personal health issues that caused me to think about what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I look at people like David Attenborough, who's now 96 years old, as I recall, and he gave a retrospective view of his life as one of his adventures on Netflix, and I watched it, and I was totally inspired by it. He never stopped working. He just became a spokesperson for nature. If you want to see a naturalist, if I could even know 1/100th of what that man has encompassed in his
Mm.
knowledge base, I would consider myself a privilege to have lived.
Well, you know a lot about parasites, Dixon, probably more than he does.
Yeah, probably. He's probably had more of them than I have, though. Considering where he's been, you should see some of the films that they've shown of him as a young man traipsing through Borneo from coast to coast. No one had ever done that before, and he did it. Uh, what things did he encounter that
Yeah.
maybe slowed him down a little bit?
All right, Dixon, do you think self-driving electric vehicles can help reduce dangerous aspects of transportation in cities and improve air quality?
Um, I don't want to answer that question because the answer might be yes, but I think none of the classes that I had at Fordham, none of them wanted cars in their city. Not a
Mm.
single one. Not even one person in each class. None of them wanted cars. What
Mm.
they wanted an efficient, public, free transportation system that got you to all parts of the city, and it was all underground. The above ground
Mm.
transportation was all walking or bicycles, skateboards. No electric skateboards, no electric scooters, nothing
Huh.
that could absolutely, result in a permanent damage to somebody. That's not the idea of living in a city. You should enjoy it. So, um, no, no, well, yeah. So self-driving vehicles. The only thing I could possibly imagine where this might be acceptable is if they were autonomous taxi cab type vehicles, where they would stop at prescribed places. People would get on and off, just like they would, a subway, except that it's above ground. I think that most people don't trust an electric vehicle. I don't think you should
Mm.
trust any of them right now. I don't think they're developed enough to take care of every situation that they would encounter, and that's been part of the problem. I don't think you could design a car that would actually consider every possibility at every moment and do the right thing. It
Dixon.
would make a choice. It would make a choice, but it might
Yeah.
be I, I've got people inside this car and I've got people outside this car. And right now, the people outside the car are in danger because I have to make a decision that protects the people inside the car. Now, what does AI say to do? You have to protect those people that you're most responsible for, which are the ones you're driving. So that means the people outside get killed or at least injured. And I think
Mm.
that's you can't force a machine to do something that people wouldn't do.
Now,
People would just
you
stop
know,
the car.
New York City's a mess because of vehicles, in my opinion. But Nevitz Forever notes, what about delivery? What about ambulance, police, fire trucks? What are you going to
Sure,
do with those, Dixon?
sure, of course. Well, listen, we didn't have enough time in the course to actually get involved in
Mm.
the nitty gritty of the infrastructure, but I think all of those have to be considered, of course.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, they do.
Okay, Dixon, which foreign or domestic cities get it right?
Right. So every Forbes comes out with its top 25 cities, and half of them are in Scandinavia, and none of them
Hmm.
are major cities except for two: Copenhagen and Stockholm. Those two cities have the gentlest, most user-friendly behaviors of any world city. But there are some wonderful cities in other places too. South America has some. Brazil, for instance, has some cities that qualify as what you would say user-friendly, so to speak. And then they list the cities that they would never live in. Uh, So the top 25,
Mm.
I don't remember all of them because a lot of them I'd never even heard of before. Malmo, before I've ever heard of Malmo, which is a small city in Sweden. I didn't know why they chose it, but of course, public transportation, public safety, great schools, clean air. Oh, they got rid of their iron manufacturing center to steel, and that solved their air pollution problems to never return, of course. And yeah, so those are the cities. I think I've been to Copenhagen several times. It's a beautiful city, and it's everybody is on board for doing the right thing to make their lives better. There's no naysayers in that city. Everybody wants a better life, and if you can get it through city government, God damn it, that's how we're going to do it. So they do it. They support it. They don't kick back and try to block something just for the sake of saying no. And we have too many other examples where that's not the case. And litigious people and people that are just out to be heard, but not for the right reasons. So I think that, yeah, Copenhagen and Stockholm would be my two places, I think.
Kim writes, one of my pet peeves are all the street lights on all night long.
Tell me about that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
But it is a
Photos
toss
of
up
the
between
Earth at night. That
safety. There's
no,
safety and stuff. People need to be safe, right?
Kim, you're right. Absolutely right. So maybe the light should go on and off by motion detection, right?
Maybe.
So no curfews. I wouldn't say, all right, no one is allowed out after 10 o'clock. Turn off the lights. That's not going to work either.
Yeah.
You can't be draconian about any of this. Um, we have a high school right across the street from where I live that leaves the lights to the football field on all year
Oh,
long.
that's
I
horrible.
don't I do not get that. I mean, people could go out and exercise on the track, but I think, after 10 o'clock at night, it's reasonable to say, okay, school grounds are off limits and you're just not going to be
Yeah,
allowed to
yeah, yeah.
come on. You're right, though, but NASA has some wonderful pictures of the Earth at
Yep,
night,
yep.
and it's depressing to see. And the countries that don't have any lights on at night, those are the countries you least like to live in, like North Korea, for instance. You can't see North Korea at night. They don't have any lights on whatsoever,
Yep.
none. But that's not for the right reason.
The New York Times Magazine just had an article on building modular homes.
Yeah,
You probably saw it.
yeah, yeah. I did. It was great, and yeah, there's a lot more literature out there on it, and
Hmm.
if you're not familiar with it, just cruise through the images on Google with cross-laminated timber, and you'll be absolutely stunned at what's going on.
Mandrake writes, there's a plan in Iceland to sink wood waste in a deep marine anoxic environment to fix carbon. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
But that's a small scale solution, isn't it?
very small,
Yeah.
very small. Yeah,
Okay.
well, you've got teratons of carbon in the atmosphere. And let's not forget methane also, because methane, even though it's less than carbon dioxide
Yep.
per molecule, it causes greater greenhouse gas effects. So
Mm-hmm.
the northern part of the Arctic Circle is melting, and methane is now coming out of the ground, which was trapped there for many, 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 many years due to the ice ages. And we don't know what effect this is going to have on the planet, but none of it's going to be good. You might say, well, let's
Yep.
trap it and burn it. Wait a minute. I don't think we should do that either.
So these buildings you were discussing earlier, the wood would they be LEED certified?
Way beyond that.
Uh,
Way beyond it.
okay.
There's a national testing laboratory which certifies building materials with regards to all kinds of things. One is carbon footprint, but another one is fireproof. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can see that in every instance,
Yeah.
cross-laminated timber outperformed the current building materials. Remarkable, but true.
Walmart's new 2.5 million square foot office is being made of laminated timber. I didn't know that.
I
Where is
love
that?
it.
Where is it? I don't know.
Um, where's Walmart's new building? I don't know.
Yeah. Good
Somewhere
timber.
in the
It's good.
Midwest, maybe.
Here, thank you, Abdulaziz, for your support of science communication. Thank you so much. MN says Alexandria, Virginia is correcting what is currently a combined sewer system.
Ah, right. New York wish they could, but it's impossible. It's
Dickson
beyond
for
hope.
mayor of New York City.
No, no, please. I want to enjoy the rest of my life. Maybe they should read the book, though. That would be nice.
And we have
That would
three
be nice.
donations here from Lavis. We have one,
Ah, lovely,
we have
lovely.
two, and we have three. Thank you so much for your support of
That's great.
science communication. I think that's Colombian pesos. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Oh, wonderful.
Speaking of lips, did you know that they now think T Rex had lips? Yeah.
So they could go like this. Mm-hmm.
So you are saying that by recycling, they do not draw any new water. If they still draw water but do not put any back, is it a net loss to whatever river supplies, those that are not on a coast?
Well, this building also has a rain capturing system, by the way. So when
Mm.
you build a building in any large city, you are automatically connected to this central grid. So this is a radical new approach to what happens after you take your first share of water. Okay, so everybody's entitled to water. If that's not the case, then you're not a city, because
Mm.
cities and every you look at it, the goal of every city. What is the goal? To keep growing, to keep getting bigger, to keep making more money, to keep expanding their influence. And it's really sad to see that as an ethos. I mean, that's it's horrible. It's horrible. There should be limits to the size of places. So Portland has tried. Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine. Portland, Oregon has tried to set up a city government system that limits the size of the population of the city that falls under the grid. So if you want to move next to Portland, that's fine, but you don't get electricity, you don't get water, you don't get sewage. So you have to supply that yourself. And there are lots of examples of houses that are self-contained and get off the grids on all those levels, but it's much more expensive.
Mm.
So that means that for Portland, at least, they don't have to worry about the extra amount of water that they have to. But of course, water capturing systems don't exist in most cities. I
Yep.
didn't mention this, but Bermuda, which is a large island, but not such a large island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, just off the coast of Virginia, has 63 plus thousand people living on it, and they capture every drop of water that falls on their houses, and that's what they use to drink, to bathe, to wash their dishes, to do all the other things you use water for, including watering the lawn. And when it rains and the cisterns are full, everybody's happy. And when it doesn't rain, people start to evoke their conservation hats. They put them on and they become good citizens by using less water until it finally returns to a normal water cycle. Now, the biggest problem that
Mm.
Bermuda has is what do you do with the wastewater? They don't have anywhere to go with it because the ground underneath each of those houses is a coral reef. It's not solid rock or it's not a series of layered soils that you might have in some places like the Midwest. There's nowhere to put it except out in the ocean, which is what they do. Guess what they're going to do now? I mean, they've already elected to do this. They're going to start installing recycling centers for municipal wastewater so that they can harvest it, recycle it, and top off everybody's cistern. And they're going to have to get used to drinking, you know what? They call
Mm.
it tap, toilet to tap. And
Toilet to tap.
people, they
Oh,
do not,
yeah.
they don't like it. They don't like
Ah,
it.
can't blame
I
them.
said, in that case, don't be an astronaut because when you go up into space, into this International Space Station, that's what they do. And one guy lived up there for a whole year. So you can imagine how he felt when he started to come down. All the water that you expire,
Wow.
All your respiration, all your urine, all your feces, all that water is recaptured. So you can do it. I mean, we can do it. We just don't want to do it.
All high schools should have courses teaching all these concepts. It's as important as teaching home economics,
There
etc.
you go. That you know what? It's Earth economics. That's maybe this should be Earth Economics 101. I should have changed the title of the book. I did intend this for high school and up.
Mm,
The language is purposefully simple. It's not dumbed down, but
mm,
it's I don't use any terms that I don't explain because I want everybody to understand. And there's a lot of pictures, and the pictures uh, are foils for the words. So if you don't get what the words mean, and then you can look over at the picture, you will get it. There's nothing you won't get about this book. Now you may not agree with everything, but there's no reason for not trying this. We've spent so much money trying to avoid this that it's time we spent the money in the right direction and put it together into a model community to have an experimental city that we can play with to keep the modern technologies coming online to make life better and better and better, like we do for kitchen aids and cars and all kinds of other gadgets that we take for granted now, telephones. All these things are tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed, and then they fail, then they succeed. Now we need to put this together into a building, a series of buildings. And I can tell you that there are some that are trying this right now. There's a little community in Japan that I show in the book. Everybody has the same footprint for solar panels on their roofs.
mm.
And all of the electricity that all of those houses generate is shared. Everybody gets the exact same amount. So you can live your life in a frugal way or in an energy conservation way, or you can spend all your energy in 3 days and then sit there on your thumbs for the rest of the week and wait for your share to come back online again. It teaches people that they should behave responsibly. And I hate that word. You should behave responsibly. You hate people telling you that. Your parents told you that. Your teachers told you that. Your boss tells you that. For Christ's sakes, wise up and tell yourself, look in the mirror. Jesus, I should be more responsible for my portion of the carbon that I generate.
Dickson, do we need a global ban on beef production to save the planet?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a slippery slope to start talking about
Mm,
whether we should consume more vegetables than meat products and things like this. My solution to the beef problem, if you'll allow me to say this, is that if we were to replace beef with American bison, our problems would be over with regards to the beef product.
why is that?
Well, because they help regenerate, just like the wildebeest in Africa regenerate the Serengeti, the grasslands. The
Mm,
beef, the beef equivalent in the United States is the bison, and the bison did the same thing. There were millions of them, and they migrated up and down from, let's say, the middle of Texas all the way up into the middle of Alberta every year, following the rains, and just like they did in the Serengetis. And the native peoples benefited from that. Uh, they ate the bison. They made their clothing out of it. They made their tents out of it. They used every part of it. Uh, we're now busy bringing them back, by the way, and especially on Native American reservations. So uh, we'll see. It tastes almost like beef. It's not quite as good as a 21-day aged, tomahawk steak that you can buy for $850. Just joking, but I mean, I think we're addicted to the beef ethic, and we have to get off that somehow. And I think bison offer a reasonable opportunity because not only will you have your meat, but you'll also have your grasslands restored. And that's a big carbon sink, too, by the way. It's a neglected carbon
yeah.
sink, but it's a good one.
Dickson is to urban planning as Michael Pollan was to the impacts of
Ah,
food
that is a kind
manufacture.
remark. I started out as a big admirer of Michael. It's not that I'm not all, still. He's drifted a little bit off from his original thesis,
Mm.
but his Omnivore's Dilemma book was absolutely riveting, and it made lots of good points. And I've heard him speak several times, and I've seen his TED talk, and he's really a very gifted journalist who learned a lot along the way, and now I think he can consider himself an eco journalist. So I'm honored to be in his company.
Visto writes, our society is worse for no longer listening to the wisdom of wise elders such as Dickson. Sorry, young Dickson.
And that's okay. I'm
Yeah,
83 years young, and I'll be glad to admit it. There's no way to deny it anyway. So there you are. I don't feel 83. I feel as young as I ever felt. So
Dickson. Do you have a
yeah,
preferred
go
place
ahead.
we should purchase your book from?
Well, there's no discount yet. I mean, you can purchase it from Columbia University Press. They'll send you a copy. Just send them a check. But if you buy it from Amazon, and I know Amazon is a bit of a gorilla in the room, so to speak. The points that accumulate with regards to the book sort of generates more interest in the book, and the
Mm,
sales go up as your consumerism goes up. I don't know. Buy it from wherever you want. Your local book
okay.
dealer is absolutely fine.
Okay, Pandan writes, as a freshman and major in tech and environmental geomatics, I feel really inspired listening to this discussion on urban planning. I will get the book on Kindle. Looking forward to read it.
Excellent. Well, that's
There you
great.
go.
Terrific.
And Mr.
Terrific.
Doreen says NASA has relied on hydrogen oxygen fuel cells for
That's right.
power on almost all manned missions. Yeah.
No question about it. No question about it.
Bernard just got your book at Thrift Books along with
Excellent.
Vertical Farm. We'll
Look at
review
you.
it after I receive it. Thanks you. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you.
Dixon's thoughts on the state of journalism and the future ability to find unfiltered, uncurated information. That's not
Oh
your field,
my.
right, Dixon?
Oh no, twip, twiv, twim, all the twips, all the twix, unfiltered. My main source of information as an adult viewer is the PBS Evening News. I used to love watching Judy Woodward, and before that, there were several other narrators, McNeil and Lair. They were a great news team. I felt that I was getting a fair picture of what was going on. I still think I feel that way. Um, I think you can't just rely on one source, though. So at night, just for laughs, before I go to bed, almost religiously, I look at Yahoo News.
Mm,
And Yahoo News is filled with misinformation. Oh, it's got so much stuff going on, but it's a great laugh. It's if you know enough about a subject, you can tell whether or not. Just look to see what the source is, and
yeah.
I don't know why they accept these stories from some of these sources, but they're just outrageous. Easy to spot.
What do you think the impacts of global warming have on our ecosystem? Will Earth be the next
Oh my.
Mars?
Oh dear. Well, if we don't do something soon, then everyone will know what will happen next because ecosystems, they don't collapse, they change. Okay.
Mm,
Ecosystems transform themselves because look what they've gone through over the last, let's say, 150 billion, a million years. Okay. There was a meteor that hit the Earth 66 million years ago that wiped out 75% of life on Earth. That's incredible. And now look at us. I mean, before there was farming, which was about 12,000 years ago, the planet was as green as it's ever been. But we've had a long history of stability in our climate, which preceded the last ice age, which was around 20,000 years ago. And the planet has been relatively calm during that time. That's changed a great deal, and probably because of a lot of what we've done to it. But it would have changed anyway. Okay, that's the point. It would have changed anyway. Climate continues to change because the geography continues to change. Plate tectonics haven't stopped. Just look at the recent volcanic activity in Iceland, for instance. They sit right on the mid Atlantic ridge with half of
mm,
Iceland on one side and half of Iceland on the other. Pretty soon there'll be two Icelands. If they stay like that for a long enough period of time, that's one of the consequences of living on that island. They'll split apart. So the impacts of global warming is already being felt on so many different ecosystem levels that it would be difficult. Although I try to chronicle some of them in the book by saying, if you don't believe in climate change, just look at this. It's remember, science is not a belief system. I want to say that again and again and again. We both, Vincent and I, are tired of saying it, basically. You can't not believe in science because science is not a belief system. You cannot believe in God because religion is a belief system. And if you're an atheist, then you don't believe in God. Okay, but you can't not believe in science because science is merely a collection of organized knowledge facts. And you can trust the facts. You can say they were collected in a way which I think what they say is true.
Hmm.
That is, if the Earth is warming and if everybody gets the same number, no matter how they measure it, then there's no doubt in my mind that that's a fact. Okay. You want to prove it otherwise, try it. But that's the point. You have to try to prove it. You just can't say, well, I don't believe that. You can't reject facts just because they disagree with your philosophy. So I have this saying we used to say, trust science, don't trust scientists, because scientists are people and we have points of view. And
Indeed.
if we discover something and we become famous for it, we like to ride that wave all the way to the end of our lives. And we think nothing can touch us now because we just discovered that proteins are the genetic material that determines heredity. Well, that was Alfred Mirsky at Rockefeller University back in the 1950s and 1960s. Even after all of the other
Hmm.
experiments with DNA showed just the opposite. But once and for all, the evidence is in. It's DNA. That's it. Even Edwin Shargaff at our own institution didn't accept it right away. So the global warming, whether you believe it or not, is it's here, and the facts are very clear, and it's getting worse, not better, meaning that ecosystems are suffering more from the damages of a rapidly changing climate. Okay, ecosystems take time to adjust, and they do adjust, but if they happen over a very short period of time, then they don't have time to adjust. And that's what's going on now. They don't have time to adjust where they used to. If we didn't pump so much CO2 in the air, if methane wasn't a problem, if we were to care more about all of us rather than just us, then I think that's the deal. I wanted to tell you what my new saying is.
Yeah.
People who do not believe in climate change are destined to suffer under their own dogma.
Hmm.
And as you well know, you can't teach an old dogma new tricks.
All right. Mark wants to know, in your book or class, do you discuss recycling heat generated by data centers?
I do. And it's not always possible to take advantage of that. But I was involved for a brief moment in time in a project in Manchester, England,
Hmm.
where they were going to set up a vertical farm next to a data processing center. And they had more than enough heat to lead them through the wintertime without having to spend a penny on fossil fuel use because the data centers spent that money on it to begin with. So they took advantage of it and it didn't go to waste. It
Hmm.
would have gone into productivity, but they didn't work out a good deal with the management of the building that they wanted to convert to the vertical farm. So it never happened. But there are a lot of other examples of where data centers, particularly Google is locating some of their data centers above the Arctic Circle, or at least they would like to do that,
Huh.
because in that case, you could warm the planet up in a faster way,
Yeah.
probably.
I'm not sure that's a good idea.
No, that's right. I'm not sure it is either.
Okay. Steve, thank you so much for your support of science education. Really appreciate it. SIP3 says, this episode has been pure gold. Let's run a crowdfunder to clone an army of Dixons. Have you cloned Dixon?
There are some people I know that would object vehemently to that. But
Pandan says scientists are gene editing cows so they don't release methane. Wow, I didn't know that.
right. Yeah, no, that's right. That is exactly right. There are ways of preventing it if you really want to. There's also apparently a substance in seaweed that if you
Yeah.
feed the seaweed to the cattle, they produce like 100 times less methane than they would have ordinarily. But it's rough getting enough seaweed to enough cattle to actually affect that.
Yeah.
By the way, bison
It's interesting.
don't have as a severe a problem as cattle
With
um,
methane, yeah.
with methane. Yeah, so uh, you would be able to eliminate that as a possibility if you could convince everyone that bison meat was as good to eat as beef is.
Alberto, thank you for your support of science communication. Very much appreciate it. Let's see here. A lot of other questions we won't be able to get to. I am of the belief that government buildings, including schools, should be built with basements to serve as shelters in disasters or storage of excess water and food in times of plenty.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, why waste space when you can use it for a good purpose? I
Yeah.
believe that's true.
Recycle, reduce, reuse, repair. I'm glad Dickson is here to remind us we are part of the planet.
Here, here.
And Mr. Doreen, this is a good way to end. What an enjoyable and informative evening. Should we paint all the roofs in America white?
Wouldn't hurt.
Okay. Don't forget, folks, to go out and buy the new city. So it's not so much for making money, Dickson. You want the ideas to percolate out there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I wish the book did cost less than it does, but it's a high quality production. They use the finest paper, recycled paper, by the way.
Yeah.
It's clay coated stock. It's not going to wear out. So one book among a lot of people will go a long way. So I think maybe, in a class of students, uh, maybe 5 or 6 copies in a class of 30 by the end of the week. It's not a long book either. I didn't write it as an academic tome that would bore the tears out of everybody, but satisfy a few critics. I wrote
Indeed.
this book so that people would read it.
That's a very good book. Everyone should read it. And here's how we should end this with JT. Water is life. Save the water.
Here, here.
I want to thank our moderators for tonight. Vanity Nutrition. Frank was here. I know that here's Andrew was here. Les was here. Steph San Francisco was here. And Barb Mack UK. I think she's left because it's terribly late over there in the UK. Did I hit everyone? Oh, Tom. Thank you, Tom, as well. Thank you for moderating tonight. We appreciate your help in keeping this a civilized discussion. I hope you enjoyed this session. Dickson Despommier, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Wow. It was an unexpected pleasure.
We have fordemopoulos.com up there. You can see and go look at some of his students' work.
Yeah.
Despommier.com, where you can go see links to buy Dickson's book, and parasiteswithoutborders.com, where you can donate to support Microbe TV through the month of January. They will double your contributions. And Parasites Without Borders is a 501c3, so your donations are U.S. federal tax deductible. We will be back next week. What is the date? Next Wednesday. Let's take a look at that. That is Wednesday. Ooh, it is January 3rd.
That's right.
We're going to be in a new year, Dickson.
Yep.
Am I going to see you Friday on Twiv?
You will.
Okay, always a slice, Dickson. Always a slice. All right, be back next Wednesday. Folks, you had a lot of good virus and prion and chronic wasting disease questions. Keep them, bring them back next week. I'm going to try and get Daniel Griffin for the first hour, and then the second hour we can do something else. Meanwhile, folks, Thanks for joining us, and please be safe. Good night, everybody.
Good night.